Black Myth Wukong is just around the corner, and I think the game has been wrongly categorized based on the gameplay and the marketing that we've seen. So today, let me go through everything you need to know about it before you buy it. Let's go! Let me know in the comments if you're excited for Black Myth Wukong. Now, we'll start with the story and the setting in general. Now, it is based on Chinese mythology, specifically a book called Journey to the West. But something that we didn't learn until quite recently, actually, thanks to Eurogamer, is that this is actually set after the books of the Vent. So Black Myth Wukong is actually a story that takes place after Journey to the West, though it retains its characters. We keep the characters' relationships and we create these battle scenes where Wukong fights against the Yao Guai boss enemies to help people immerse into their amazing world, said a game science spokesperson. So if you're wondering about reading the books and maybe getting spoiled, you can definitely read the books, though it may still be spoilery, especially if they're doing some sort of a retelling thing here, maybe, considering we're going to see a lot of the characters. And I personally haven't read the book, though I am considering it. If you have read the book, let me know in the comments if you think it is worthwhile reading it either before or after Black Myth Wukong. Now, Wukong as well isn't an open world game. It's actually a pretty linear progression path, but it's not as linear as I initially thought it was. So based on some of the previews and the information that came out recently from Summer Games Fest, from the people that got to play it for about 2 hours there, the game definitely is an open world. It is pretty much like a pretty overall typical like linear progression pathway. However, there will be like optional bosses and like side quests and the likes that you'll be able to find and uncover, not only just to, you know, progress yourself a little bit further, but to unlock unique things like new shape-shifting forms, more on that later in this video, as well as other like upgrades as well that you may be able to get. If you do miss any of these things, you can travel back to previous areas, but it's not currently known if any of that content is actually missable. Say for example, you know, you advance the main story too far by defeating a boss, if like it locks you out of anything. We don't necessarily know that yet, but we do know that it is a pretty linear progression path, similar to the Lords of the Fallen from last year, if any of you guys played that, though I do recommend it. It's a pretty good game. But basically that's a pretty linear progression with these like typical Souls areas that you can like explore, go off the beaten path to like get upgrades, etc. But for the most part, you are progressing in a linear fashion like throughout that entire game. Combat is going to be the biggest thing for Black Myth Wukong, and it's probably what drew you to the game. It's absolutely what drew me to the game from that initial like insane gameplay reveal that we got for Black Myth Wukong. Now, GameScience have often referred to Black Myth Wukong as not a Souls-like, but you can rest at bonfires, known as shrines here, that will restore your HP and revive defeated enemies. If you die, you'll lose some of your progression towards your current skill point, like a typical, you know, ruins system, but not lose the skill points you've already unlocked. Skill points are spent then on skills and upgrades, not attribute points, that sort of thing. So I'd say Wukong is like a Souls Light, not a Souls like, similar to, say, Stellar Blade from earlier this year. However, there is a little bit more to it than Stellar Blade in terms of its progression aspects, which we'll get into in a little bit as well. But it's definitely a game that's heavily using the Souls formula to upgrade yourself and lean into that whole world structure, but it's seemingly more forgiving in nature than a typical Elden Ring or actual, you know, Soulsborne game. In combat though, you will be mostly leaning into a dodge mechanic. Most of the enemy attacks that are coming towards you, you'll be aiming to dodge or perfect dodge out of the way of those attacks. And after you have used 3 dodges, there is like a cooldown before you can dodge again to like prevent you from, say, dodge spamming like you may do in, say, an Elden Ring, for example. But there is like multiple things on the HUD to pay attention to as well. Like you've got your HP bar in the bottom left hand corner as a white bar. There's also a blue bar, which is like your mana for your spell usage, and then a yellow bar, which is your stamina, which you'll then be using for things as well. Now, for the most part, you'll be using light attacks to build up a focus meter, which can then be used to have focus points that you can dump into like a heavy attack to combo into like your light attacks or other different like skills you can use for them. It was mentioned in some of the previews that as you advance through the skill tree, there'll be other things you can spend those focus points on. But most of the combat here will just be following that typical format, using those spells, your basic attacks here, using those focus points to then dump extra things into it. Say if you're focusing on that route rather than say focusing on magic. However, there is also a shape shifting mechanic. You could think of this this kind of like an ultimate ability in a way from what we've seen. So when you've defeated certain enemies or bosses or what have you, you will get access to like a transformation where you can like turn into that enemy or creature or anything. In the IGN preview, they mentioned that they were transforming into a boss that they initially had to be like an optional boss. Then it did unlock the transformation where they could turn into that boss and like basically use all of their attacks. This isn't just about combat though. There are other ways to use this. We've seen in some of the previews, like being able to just use this to like navigate throughout the world or like avoid certain encounters potentially. So it'll be interesting to see how the transformation and the shapeshifting mechanics actually are used, but definitely in combat there's going to be some great strengths to it, being able to turn into, you know, bosses that you've defeated and melt on the current boss that you're fighting, or potentially like other ways to use it outside of combat. I'm interested to see how that all works. Now, progression is something we've touched on a couple of times here, but the progression mechanic here is going to be based around skill points, and you'll essentially defeat enemies and bosses to gain like experience, which will then progress a bar to unlock a skill point. Now, once you've unlocked that skill point is just like unlocked completely. So if you die, you won't lose that skill point, but you'll lose your progression to like the next skill point. Very similar to the Jedi Survivor system, if you remember that, where you sort of unlocked a skill point and you could spend it freely, and once you've spent it, you won't lose that skill point again, right? You've just like got access to it forever. Now, spending those skill points, there's a few different things you'll spend them on, and that's the 3 different skill trees. There is a magic skill tree, which is all of your spells, and one of the common ones that we've seen is Immobilize, which like freezes enemies for a limited time, which you can like follow up with attacks before they unfreeze. There's also like your personal skill tree, like the Monkey King skills for things like improving your roll or potentially your HP or whatever's like in that specific tree we haven't exactly seen, but it will be based around like your personal ability to improve, say, yourself and your own capabilities, like improving your stamina, for example, or your FP. The last skill tree is for your staff. Now, this will unlock new stances and skills based around your staff and those focus points that we were touching on earlier. One of the common ones we've seen is the tower stance, where you can turn your staff into like this long pillar that you can use to like sit on top and like avoid ground attacks. And when you're up there, you will build up focus that you can then use to like slam yourself down with like the big long staff if you do choose to do that and go down that route. How these different stances and the spells and everything all interact, we'll have to wait to see for the full game, but I can't wait to play around with these and like create some builds, find out what the best spells are, and I'll definitely have plenty of content on that stuff once we do have access to the game, so make sure you subscribe to the channel for all of that good stuff. But you will be equipping armor that have set bonuses applied to them as well as new staffs, exactly. So there won't be different weapon types, like everything's going to be a staff, but there are different staffs. The best example of this leads us into our next point, which is about the editions of the game. In the Digital Deluxe Edition, it is mentioned that there is a Folk Opera set as well as a Bronze Cloud staff. Exactly what the effects are on these, we don't rightly know at this moment, but you can see there that you've got access to a set which has 4 different pieces of gear as well as a staff, and you'll find these throughout the game as well that will have their own set bonuses and different looks and feels to them as well. So again, creating those builds and the way that they interact is going to be really exciting for me personally. And Black Myth Wukong is releasing on August 20th on PC and PS5, except it's not releasing on Xbox yet. It is listed on their website as it is coming to Xbox, just not at launch. In the pre-order FAQ, we are currently optimizing the Xbox Series X and S version to meet our quality standards, so it won't release simultaneously with the other platforms. We apologize for the delay and aim to minimize the wait for Xbox users. We'll announce a release date as soon as it meets our quality standards. What this means to me is it's probably a Baldur's Gate 3 situation where the Xbox S is dragging the chain here, as if you don't know, Xbox does have a requirement that you release their games on Series X and S, and that they are feature complete across both, so you can't like remove a feature from like one or the other, like everything has to be like the same. That's why the Baldur's Gate situation took a little while, because there was a exception here made because of like the co-op that is in the Baldur's Gate game, like the split screen co-op didn't work very well on Series S, so they did make an exception there. But we're getting on a tangent here, but essentially that's probably why that is the case here. But it will come to Xbox eventually, just not on day one. But let me know your thoughts on Black Myth Wukong in the comments down below. Are you excited for this? I'm personally really excited for this. I can't wait to play a different combat system based on what we've seen here, like very fluid and agile focused. I'm very keen to jump in and check this out. But thank you for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.